Venezuela was once a beacon of prosperity in Latin America, a shining example of what a nation could achieve with the right resources and vision. The discovery of vast oil reserves in the early 20th century transformed the nation's fortunes, turning it from a largely agrarian society into an economic powerhouse almost overnight. Oil revenues brought unprecedented wealth, filling the coffers of the government and creating a new class of wealthy elites who enjoyed the finer things in life. Venezuela experienced rapid economic growth, with new industries springing up and infrastructure projects transforming the landscape. It became a magnet for migrants seeking a better life, attracting people from all over Latin America and beyond who were drawn by the promise of prosperity. The country boasted modern infrastructure and a burgeoning middle class, with new homes, schools, and hospitals springing up to meet the needs of its growing population. For a time, Venezuela seemed destined for greatness, with a bright future that seemed almost assured. Venezuela's oil reserves were the envy of the world, a seemingly endless source of wealth that promised to secure the nation's future. The country sat atop the largest proven reserves, a fact that gave it significant leverage on the global stage. This attracted foreign investment and fueled industrial development, as companies from around the world sought to tap into Venezuela's oil wealth. The government invested heavily in social programs, using oil revenues to build hospitals, schools, and housing projects that improved the quality of life for many. These programs improved healthcare, education, and housing. Venezuela's future appeared bright, with a population that was healthier, better educated, and more prosperous than ever before. The nation was poised to become a regional powerhouse, a leader in Latin America that could shape the future of the entire region. However, this dependence on oil would prove to be a double-edged sword, bringing both prosperity and vulnerability. The Venezuelan economy became dangerously reliant on a single commodity, making it susceptible to the whims of the global oil market. This reliance made it vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices, which could rise and fall with little warning, bringing boom times and busts in quick succession. While oil prices remained high, Venezuela prospered, with wealth flowing into the country and fueling a consumer boom. But the seeds of future instability were sown, as the economy's over-reliance on oil created underlying vulnerabilities. The concentration of wealth in the oil sector created disparities, with a small elite enjoying immense wealth, while many others were left behind. The gap between the rich and poor widened, creating social tensions that would later erupt into open conflict. Corruption flourished, eroding public trust in government and undermining the effectiveness of social programs. The seeds of social unrest were sown amidst the prosperity, as people grew increasingly frustrated with the inequalities and corruption that plagued the country. Venezuela's economic miracle was built on a fragile foundation, one that would eventually crumble under the weight of its own contradictions. The warning signs were there, but they went largely unheeded, as the country continued to ride the wave of oil-fueled prosperity without addressing the underlying issues. Venezuela's dependence on oil had profound consequences. The nation's economy became heavily tied to the fortunes of the oil industry, making it susceptible to the fluctuations of the global oil market. The influx of oil revenue created a false sense of security. The wealth generated from oil exports led to rapid urban development and a surge in consumerism, masking underlying economic vulnerabilities. The government neglected to diversify the economy. Instead of investing in other critical sectors such as technology, education, and infrastructure, the focus remained predominantly on oil. Investment in other sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing lagged. This lack of diversification meant that when oil prices fell, there were no other robust industries to cushion the economic blow. This over-reliance on oil made Venezuela vulnerable to external shocks. The global oil market is notoriously volatile, and any significant drop in prices had immediate and severe repercussions for the Venezuelan economy. The neglect of other sectors had long-term consequences. Infrastructure deteriorated, businesses closed, and the overall quality of life for many Venezuelans declined. Venezuela became increasingly reliant on imports for basic goods. This dependency meant that any disruption in foreign trade could lead to shortages of essential items, causing widespread hardship. This dependence on foreign goods made the economy vulnerable to inflation. As the value of the Venezuelan currency plummeted, the cost of imported goods soared, exacerbating the economic crisis. When oil prices declined, the country faced a shortage of foreign currency to pay for essential imports. This led to a severe scarcity of goods, further crippling the economy. The lack of economic diversification also resulted in a loss of competitiveness. Without investment in innovation and modernization, Venezuelan industries fell behind their global counterparts. Venezuelan industries struggled to compete in the global market. The focus on oil meant that other sectors were underdeveloped and unable to meet international standards. The country's dependence on oil exports made it difficult to attract foreign investment in other sectors. Investors were wary of the unstable economic environment and the lack of diversification. The focus on oil extraction overshadowed the need for a more balanced and sustainable economic model. Environmental degradation and social issues were often overlooked in the pursuit of oil profits. Despite warnings from economists, successive governments failed to address the issue of diversification. The allure of immediate oil revenue was too strong, leading to short-sighted policies. Short-term gains took precedence over long-term sustainability. The government prioritized immediate financial benefits over the development of a resilient and diverse economy. The allure of easy oil money blinded policymakers to the dangers of economic dependence. This myopic vision led to a cycle of boom and bust, with the country repeatedly facing economic crises. Venezuela's economic fate became inextricably linked to the volatile global oil market. The nation's future hinged on the unpredictable swings of oil prices, leaving it perpetually vulnerable. Hugo Chávez's rise to power in 1999 marked a turning point in Venezuela's history. Chávez, a charismatic former military officer, promised to address the country's deep-seated inequality and poverty. He implemented socialist programs known as Bolivarian missions. These missions provided healthcare, education, and housing to the poor. Chávez's policies initially enjoyed widespread popularity, particularly among the poor and working class. The social programs, funded by oil revenue, brought tangible benefits to millions. Chávez also nationalized key industries including oil and telecommunications. He vowed to redistribute wealth and empower the marginalized. However, Chávez's economic policies were characterized by mismanagement and a disregard for market forces. Price controls led to shortages of basic goods. Expropriations of private businesses created institutional instability, which created uncertainty and discouraged investment. The government's expansionary fiscal policies were funded with the Venezuelan central bank printing money, which brought high levels of inflation. Chávez's confrontational style and anti-American rhetoric alienated international investors. His government's crackdown on dissent and erosion of democratic institutions raised concerns about authoritarianism. While Chávez's social programs initially lifted millions out of poverty, his economic mismanagement laid the groundwork for future crises, economic disaster, and political instability. The year 2014 marked a significant turning point in Venezuela's economic fortunes. With Nicolas Maduro as president, global oil prices plummeted dramatically, sending shockwaves through the global economy. This sudden drop had a catastrophic impact on the Venezuelan economy, which was heavily reliant on oil exports for the majority of its revenue. The country, once buoyed by high oil prices, found itself in a precarious position. The decline in oil prices exposed the deep-seated structural weaknesses of the Venezuelan economy. Factories that once thrived were now dilapidated, and businesses that had been the backbone of the economy were forced to close. The Venezuelan government, heavily reliant on oil revenue to fund its extensive social programs, found itself starved of cash. The financial district, once bustling, now faced a severe downturn. The country faced a severe shortage of foreign currency, making it increasingly difficult to import essential goods such as food, medicine, and industrial supplies. This shortage exacerbated the already dire economic situation. Supermarket shelves emptied as shortages became widespread. Long lines formed outside stores with desperate shoppers hoping to find basic necessities. The government's response to the crisis, which included emergency meetings and public addresses, only exacerbated the situation. Protests against government policies became a common sight. Price controls, intended to curb inflation, backfired spectacularly and led to further shortages. Stores with controlled prices had empty shelves, and the black market flourished. In a desperate attempt to manage the crisis, Maduro's government printed more money, fueling hyperinflation that spiraled out of control. The value of the Venezuelan bolivar plummeted. The economy went into a tailspin, with the stock market crashing and the economic downturn deepening. People struggled to make ends meet as their savings evaporated. The collapse of oil prices exposed the folly of Venezuela's over-reliance on a single commodity. The once lucrative oil barrels now stood empty, symbolizing the nation's economic despair. Years of economic mismanagement and a lack of diversification had left the country ill-prepared for the shock. Abandoned industrial projects and closed factories were stark reminders of missed opportunities. Venezuela's once bright economic prospects evaporated as the nation plunged into a deep and protracted crisis. The suffering of the people became a poignant testament of extreme socialist policies, the economic mismanagement and over-reliance on one and only one commodity: oil.